right, hello everyone. This is my presentation on access to the outdoors and the importance of public land. This is just a note that for any folks who may be hard of hearing and or have technical problems with the sound recording, I've made sure that the text on each slide aligns verbatim with the words I'm speaking in the recording. Thank you for viewing and listening. Private versus public. How do art and media reflect the socioeconomic ideals and standards that align with the perception of land ownership? In this presentation, I will explore the idea of access to land and resources, the ownership and politicization of the environment, and how individuals and populations use and manipulate it for personal benefits. In my research, I have discovered organizations that recognize and combat the notion of privatized land and work to create solutions to the various problems that arise due to private land ownership. Private versus public land. Unfortunately, a major part of the environment is privately controlled, which is where most of the harm towards the outdoors, including the perception of it, is done. The control of information surrounding environmental concerns is greatly affected by private ownership, not only of land and natural resources, but of media, business, and imagery that misrepresents human collaboration with the environment as a whole. In terms of industrialization, the acquisition of land by the federal government prevents the desolation of natural resources, ecosystems, and natural habitats. Therefore, public land not only promotes diverse environmental collaboration, but encourages the health of the land itself. The significance of accurate representation of a community. It is clear that there must be a shift in the positions of power in respect to environmental preservation and access. Like many things, it is the socio-economic elite, mostly comprised of white men, who have the majority of decision-making abilities when it comes to environmental protection and general access to the outdoors. It is important that we strive toward a future where the leaders of an organization proportionally represent those affected by its decisions. The superimposition of Western ideology on Native Indigenous arts. It is important to note that when researching art of the indigenous Americas, the first works that show up in a simple Google search are those of white male artists such as Albert Bierstadt that superimpose non-indigenous ideals onto the perception of the landscape. The Native American people have historically concentrated on the idea of the collective community whilst creating work and developing an intense language of craft, whereas it is a much more Western notion within art making to attribute credit to one sole creator. Native and indigenous art does not often focus on the reproduction of landscape, but uses its materials and imagery to accompany it. In indigenous culture, the land is not merely an image that humankind has the ability to reproduce, only mimic. Like women, indigenous peoples have historically been left out of conservation decision-making, yet indigenous peoples, and especially indigenous women, are more directly dependent on natural resources and inhabit areas that are more vulnerable to climate change. It is tragic that throughout American history, ethnic minorities have so often been underrepresented or intentionally excluded from the outdoors. The idea of land ownership is incredibly present in the idea of outdoor exploration. Historically, BIPOC have been excluded from access to both public land and land ownership. The perception of the outdoors is so greatly affected by the broad reach of advertising, so it is important to consider the consequences of underrepresentation in imagery and media surrounding various wilderness activities. Living in an image-dominant world, it is clear that the advertisement surrounding the outdoors greatly affects viewer perception of outdoor activity. By including marginalized communities in imagery that markets the outdoors, the opportunity is presented to create a more diverse, welcoming, and safe community to explore. Imagery, including painting, advertisements, photographs, social media posts, etc., that exclude BIPOC, markets an elitist and traditional understanding of potential collaboration with nature. To end, I just wanted to show some examples of green public spaces to explore for free in Boston. The first is the Rose Kennedy Greenway, which recognizes inequities that exist in access to public spaces and that these inequities impact the way that many people experience public parks. It is committed to providing a park environment that is welcoming to racially, culturally, and economically diverse residents and visitors. The second is the Boston Common and Public Gardens, which are an amazing public green space that are part of Boston's Emerald Necklace. The parks act as a stage for free speech and public assembly and work hard to preserve the natural land they were founded on. Here are my references, and thank you guys for listening.